Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. My name is Paul, the Canadian Snowman, here once again with another awesome history video from Kings and Generals, of course. And we're doing medieval travel and pilgrimage. I guess medieval travel, obviously like a horse and buggy kind of thing. I'm more interested, I guess, in the pilgrimage thing. The only really reference I know from I can't even pronounce the dang thing, is pilgrimage is watching Vikings. Oh, I go. Spoiler alert, so if you're in the middle of starting watching Vikings, you might want to, 20 seconds not listen to me. That's not really that big a deal. Anyways, I believe Alfred from Vikings, he goes on a pilgrimage as a boy to Rome for a pilgrimage, and I guess they comes back years later. But the king of not all of England, but I forget which part of England is, sends Alfred to Rome for a pilgrimage, and I think it's basically a religious kind of thing. I mean, I guess it kind of says right there when I pulled up this graphic. I don't know, but for it's a religious kind of thing, but I don't know what that really does. Is that like gets them kind of in line to be higher up in the church? I really have no idea. I thought it was interesting, and like I said, this is one of these one-off videos because I'm actually about to start doing what's it called, Muslim expansion, because I've been wanting to do that for a while. I've been kind of delaying it because it's like a 9-part series. But anyways, yeah, we're gonna jump into this medieval travel and pilgrimage. All right. If you guys are from Europe, you guys probably know a lot more about this. Or maybe if you're religious, is this more of like a religious? I'm not a religious person, so maybe it's more a religious thing. Like if you're religious, you know this, or this is pretty much. Is this still like? Can you still do this, or is this like a medieval time thing? I guess I'll find out. But yeah, let's check it out. Please hit that like and subscribe button below. I'd really appreciate it. And yeah, Kings and Generals, you should subscribe to them as well. Awesome channel. Bam.
One of the commodities without which we could not imagine the modern world is travel. Whether for business or pleasure, in our own country or abroad, it could be as simple as boarding an airplane and owning a passport, and sometimes...
Yeah, because, guys, now it's like, I guess we think about when people go to war, they're gone for like maybe 6 months or a year at a time without you kind of seeing your families and whatnot. I'm sure like back then, man, you might have gone like 10 years, 5 to 10 years without seeing your family. And a lot of that probably just due to travel. I mean, like, imagine walking from Rome to England, man. How long would that take you? Like just like 6 months, maybe, just to walk that. It might not take that long. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, definitely a big reason that soldiers were away from families for so long.
Sometimes not even that. Travel and borders are simple and straightforward concepts nowadays. However, it was not always so. A journey from London to Milan or Jerusalem would have been much longer and more eventful during the Middle Ages than crossing half of the world would be today. As we often take the modern simplicity of travel for granted, it's important to see how it functioned in a time drastically different from our own. Languages remain the main barrier when you are traveling abroad, but fear not. The sponsor of this video, Babbel, is here with its applied approach to learn more than 10 languages quickly. Indeed, weeks. You only need to go from anywhere and don't even need an internet connection. The medieval Flemish politician Anselm Adorno said, "Some are foolish enough to think that there is no country but their own." Our first thought is that the statement rings true only for a handful of far-travelled men such as himself, yet that it can be easily discarded for the majority of his contemporaries. The belief that people in the Middle Ages would live out their entire lives in their home village is a tragic misconception. As man is curious by nature, it is only expected that one would lunge at the opportunity to travel. Although the usual travelers were indeed wealthy and influential individuals, such as nobles, diplomats, and merchants, the medieval commoner was mobile as well. Farmers, who constituted the majority of the population, left lands that would not yield crops and places with a merciless climate to find a new home and start a better life. Some scholars even go so far as to say that the Crusades were only an excuse for extravagant travel. The farther away from home and everyday life, the better and more interesting the destinations were. Alas,
Never really thought about it like that. People kind of wanted to go off to wars just for something to do. They were bored, and I guess I was kind of one of those people that. But a lot of people are just kind of like farmers and kind of just stayed around their own town, and that's just kind of what they did. If they were born like as a farmer, that's what they did. They didn't really. Maybe they're scared to go off and go on and venture off kind of thing, just because maybe there was some bad stories or whatnot. But like they said, like people were curious creatures, and we want to know stuff. So yeah, definitely interesting there. I didn't realize like farmers kind of like went from land to land. I figured you'd have to just like today, you'd have to buy the land you're moving to. You can't just show up, oh, this is good land, and just start a home there. Maybe back in those days where maybe everything's not discovered yet. I don't know. Back to the show. Interesting stuff, though.
Everyday life, the better and more interesting the destinations were. Alas, there was a way for even the lowliest of commoners to see places far beyond their home, to take a pilgrimage. The usual reasons for someone going on a pilgrimage were to find penance, to be healed of an affliction, or to reinvigorate their faith. Nevertheless, many would opt to take the road in order to see a saint's relics or to visit important religious locations. Not all pilgrimages were undertaken for religious reasons. Pilgrims would often start their journeys with the hope of finding love, adventure, or engaging in debauchery. French historian Jacques Le Goff calls pilgrimages the medieval version of tourism.
Okay, I was totally off. I thought maybe it was a religion thing that higher up people sent their kids or relatives to a place to learn, probably most likely for religious reasons, but apparently it's just, hey, I want to go off on it, basically an adventure and learn this or discover that, or you just to travel just to learn and discover about the world pretty much. So that's definitely interesting. Like, so basically you're off to be a tourist, right? Interesting. Like, yeah, you're bored, your own town, there's no one, people you like, you can't find love. I'm gonna go on an adventure and go find love. So that could be your pilgrimage to find love, and maybe someone's adventure is to go find wealth, I guess. Cool stuff.
Le Goff calls pilgrimages the medieval version of tourism. Contrary to popular belief, women commonly went on pilgrimages too. In most cases, this was frowned upon by their family and religious leaders. The cause...
I would definitely say the only reason it was I don't know if it's frowned upon, but I think the family would just be worried. I can just see back in those days, a woman would just be, it just seems like they'd be an easy target for, people to rob, and unfortunately, like, or get raped or something. So I can definitely see families not looking down upon it, but, just being worried for the loved ones.
This was frowned upon by their family and religious leaders. The cause for that is rooted in the medieval belief that women had sinful tendencies and were more likely to misbehave. Wow. Perhaps the most famous complaint ever made by a cleric about female pilgrims was voiced by St. Boniface in a letter to Cuthbert, the Archbishop of Canterbury. In the letter, he urges Cuthbert to forbid women from his religious community to take pilgrimages to Rome, as many of them perish on the way there and few keep their virtue. One particular sentence in the letter reads that there are very few towns in Lombardy and Frankland or Gaul where there is not a courtesan or harlot of English stock. In the early Middle Ages, before the commoner could even leave for a pilgrimage, he had to receive permission from his family and his local bishop. Having made sure that the reason for the pilgrimage isn't mere wanderlust, the bishop gives the traveller his blessing, the pilgrim's staff, a letter of safe conduct for the monasteries that he would visit, and a scrip, a certificate of sorts which can be used in lieu of payment. The pilgrim would also...
That's also interesting, I guess, for travel. If you get stopped by someone and get, I guess, proof of what you're doing, you're not going to spy or nothing. You're on a pilgrimage. And it's cool to actually give you that staff. I thought that was just, something random that they got, but it's actually a thing. So interesting.
A certificate of sorts which can be used in lieu of payment. The pilgrim would also wear specific clothing that would designate them as such. There were 5 insignia which marked the pilgrim: the red cross on his mantle, the grey hat marked with a cross, the beard, the script with the flask, and the donkey. In reality, the outfit was much simpler. Sources differ as to what pilgrims wore, with some of them including a wide-brimmed hat and others stating that the pilgrim would be dressed completely in white.
I don't know. Like I said, I guess this is right, but like they said, there's so many different ways to do a pilgrimage that this just seems like, there was the donkey and everything. The most common. I can't think of the word for it, but I'm sure not. I don't think I don't think a high percentage would travel like this. I don't know. I think they just go with their regular clothes, got themselves a backpack or bag, and whatever maybe food they have with them, and they, I think a lot of them probably just went like that. I guess if you go to a bishop for a pilgrimage, he's gonna set you up maybe to dress like that. I don't know. I guess so. I don't know. It's hard to believe that that's how they set you off in a pilgrimage when there's so many different reasons to do so. But then again, there's so many different reasons, but they probably just lie to the bishop just to go on those reasons, so they have to dress up. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to...
hat, and others stating that the pilgrim would be dressed completely in white. Although the trip itself was still risky, the outfit provided the pilgrim with some benefits and protection. This was not always the case, though. As expected, many non-pilgrims made use of the outfit for their own benefit. One example of this is when an agent of Philip the Good of Burgundy impersonated a pilgrim so that he could travel the Middle East and map out cities and forts in case of a new crusade. During their travels, the pilgrims would need a place to stay and rest. That place would frequently be an inn. Inns were expensive at times. However, in the staunchly Christian medieval Europe, that would not always be a problem. In the Gospel of Luke, there is a story of a man saving a traveller who was left for dead after being robbed by bandits. The man subsequently tended to the traveller's wounds and took him to an inn. Doing their best to be good Christians, innkeepers tried to emulate the aforementioned parable of the Good Samaritan. Therefore, they would frequently give out room and food to pilgrims at highly reduced prices.
Oh.
Although less comfortable than inns, monasteries provided hospitality to pilgrims in an age when inns were not always easy to find. At times, the monasteries themselves were the goals of the pilgrims, especially the larger and more affluent ones. For example, the abbey at Cluny attracted a constant stream of pilgrims who visited the abbey's collection of holy relics, most notably the ashes of Saints Peter and Paul. In the 12th century, Cluny also acquired a fragment of the cross, a finger of St. Stephen, and a tooth of John the Baptist.
What?
At their arrival, pilgrims were given a pound of bread and a measure of wine, along with a further half of that amount on the second day. They were also given a penny on their departure, provided they had not visited the monastery previously that year. In larger cities, pilgrims could always try to find room in a hospice or fondico, a hostel for pilgrims and travellers. Rooms in such places could prove difficult to find, as the hospices were often overflowing with the city's own impoverished citizens.
Glorious.
Yeah. I guess having an outfit would help because, like this, like that means that just anyone, people just, the low of the low, people like the homeless, they can just show up and get their free food and sleep there and whatnot. And I don't know how the church might have looked upon that kind of thing. And if they allowed all those homeless people in, then there probably wouldn't be any food. I guess food left. I don't know if they could really feed all those people. But yeah, since a bishop or someone's the one who sent this pilgrim on his mission, then obviously they would be, oh, okay, this is not just one of those homeless people. This person actually kind of belongs here and is on a pilgrimage. So I guess that the whole outfit kind of makes sense for when you're doing your stop, trying to differentiate yourself from like kind of the poor. I guess I don't know.
Their way to one of the main flowing with the city's own impoverished citizens. On their way to one of the main holy sites, pilgrims would come across a myriad of smaller shrines. The number of these smaller shrines would only grow during the course of the Middle Ages, as increasing numbers of local saints were venerated. These local shrines were potentially dangerous places for the unsuspecting pilgrim. Various charlatans and swindlers would be selling false holy relics, and thieves were lurking at every corner. Before a saint's festival or feast day, bandits would also stalk the roads leading to the shrine. Rarely armed pilgrims were easy targets for the brigands, and many would end up robbed and killed on the road. Accordingly, it was prudent for pilgrims to find companions for their journeys.
I was gonna say, like, it seems like they'd be easy pickings for just on the roads, and that aren't used a lot. I mean, people can just sit there and wait for someone to come along and rob them. So you think they'd have some kind of knife, or yeah, like I said, having someone travel with you, just safety in numbers, right? But man, I wonder how often that happened back in those days. Just disappear, and no one, your traveler, so no one even would think to look for you.
The rate of travel depended on the quality of the roads. It is believed that at the Roman Empire's apogee, the total length of roads within the empire mounted up to 80,000 to 100,000 kilometers. During the fall of the Western Roman Empire, many of these roads would disappear. Some, like the Via Aurelia, Via Cassia, Via Claudia, Via Appia, Via Julia Augusta, and Via Flaminia, were still in use in the early Middle Ages. However, by the 8th and 9th centuries, most of them decayed beyond recognition, and newer roads were not as well made. Fortunately for the pilgrims, the main roads that led from modern-day France to northern Italy and Rome were being looked after relatively well due to their importance for trade and travel. By the High Middle Ages, with realms in Europe reaching a certain degree of stability, lords started investing in the building, maintenance and improvement of roads. One of the critical choke points on medieval roads were bridges. Travelers wishing to cross a bridge would have to pay a toll. Unlike in stories, there was no troll trying to exact a toll, but a fort, ranging from a small building to an actual castle. Uniform laws dictated that pilgrims were to pass without paying tolls, or with paying only a fraction of the amount. Many rulers would use the money earned from tolls to further invest in infrastructure. This brought them even more travelers.
All of which is, tolls are still used this day for the exact same thing. So that's kind of awesome how basically the toll started right here. That's kind of where it came from. That's cool.
To further invest in infrastructure. This brought them even more travelers and would have further increased their profits. Other critical choke points for pilgrims were mountains, such as the Alps. The Alps were routinely the most dreaded part of every pilgrim's journey, as countless travelers perished there each year. Whether it was the snow, ice, mud, lack of roads, or dangerous terrain, the mountains were detested and feared both in winter and in summer. For many centuries, there were only a few mountain passes in the Alps. The crucial St. Gotthard's Pass was not developed until the 13th century. The turbulent Reuss River made all travel impossible, as it frequently overflowed when the snow began to melt. The first bridge that crossed the Schalonnen Gorge, the so-called Devil's Bridge, was quite dangerous and had to be rebuilt many times. One pilgrim, named Felix Fabry, mentions that crossing the Rhaetian Alps became much easier near the end of the 15th century. According to his accounts, the ruler of Austria used gunpowder to blast through the mountains and created a road through which even carts could pass.
Wow.
If the final destination was Jerusalem, once in northern Italy, the pilgrims would usually take one of two courses for travel. The first one involved initially traveling to Rome and the other major cities before going to Venice. The second option was to head directly to Venice. Once in Venice, the pilgrims would usually stay at a fondico until arrangements could be made for boarding a ship to the Levant. Though La Serenissima was viewed by some as just a stopping point, many pilgrims enjoyed the splendor and abundance of one of the most unique cities in the world. They praised the richness of the churches, the grandiose architecture, and how lively the city was. What was supposed to be a mere stepping stone towards Jerusalem ended up fascinating pilgrims as much as the holy city itself. This was especially true for those pilgrims that were not blinded by pure faith. The number of arrivals in Venice became so large that they established a tourist office within the city. Specialized guides for visitors, named tholomarii, were also trained. The voyage from Venice to Jaffa or Alexandria would usually last for about 5 weeks. The conditions on the ship were not enviable in any way. The food was awful, the potable water was not clean, and large numbers of passengers were crowded in a small space. Additionally, sea travel was difficult.
Yeah, I don't see how, obviously, if you're not a king or someone of nobility, you're going to be stuck crammed probably in the basement of it, eating some nasty food. You're sharing food probably with the rats. You're down there for 5 weeks, a lot of food's going to get spoiled. And man, who knows what kind of nasty water you're drinking out of. Man, the conditions on a ship had to be extremely horrible. Even for the nobles, even though they got a little better stuff, I mean, they're still stuck on the same ship. So, but anyway, yeah, that would still stink. That would probably be the least favorite part of any journey. I think I'd rather just walk than go on one of these ships, and then, yeah.
Difficult for some people due to seasickness and fear. Some writers say that the crew and the passengers were like one big family during those 5 weeks. On the other hand, others mention how fights and arguments between passengers were commonplace. En route to the Holy Land, the Venetian galleys stopped at several ports. Candia was applauded for its food and architecture, while pilgrims were usually appalled by Regus's inhumane slave markets. Once in Jaffa or Alexandria, pilgrims had to wait for transport and accommodation to be organized. The local authorities treated the pilgrims with suspicion, and sometimes with hostility. A tax was collected for each passenger before entry to the port was allowed. To bypass this, some ship captains lied and presented a number of passengers as members of the crew. Guides would take the pilgrims to the funduks, the Arabic form of the word fondico. Having organized the transport, the pilgrims were finally on their way to the omega of their journey, Jerusalem. Jerusalem may be 750 meters above sea level, however the climb was as much spiritual as it was physical for the pilgrims. The duration of the pilgrim stay in Jerusalem would vary, however most stayed from 2 to 6 weeks. During that time, they would find accommodation in various places depending on their nationality.
I'm sorry, but 2 to 6 weeks sounds extremely short. Considering how long you're traveling for like a year or something, and then you finally get to your location, and then you spend like a month there. It definitely seems kind of odd if that's kind of your main goal, is just to go to Jerusalem to see these, the architecture and stuff.
Would find accommodation in various places depending on their nationality. Italians would be sent to the monastery of Mount Sion. The Germans would be sent to various houses, while the French stayed at the Hospital of St. John. The final goal was to enter the temple of the Lord and worship in the place where he walked. Therefore, the main destination for Christian pilgrims was the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They would end up spending the night there, a symbolic ritual of death and resurrection. Religion played an important role in the lives of medieval people. Consequently, it is of no surprise that religion was the main motivation, or at least a viable excuse for people to travel. In the monotonous medieval world, pilgrimages provided a sense of freedom that one would not otherwise get to feel. Experiencing the unknown and meeting new people enriched the lives of the pilgrims, and through their many stories, they would influence the lives of the people around them. More videos on various aspects of religious history are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button.
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Yeah, because you might just go out for an adventure, but like, you know, obviously you've been through it, very dangerous, but when you do return home, like, people had to look up to you like in awe, like, my God, what did you see? What did you see? Like, you'd be an extremely wise person, you know, and, you know, knowledge is power too. And that'd just be fascinating because, you know, a lot of people probably scared to go out, and they'd look up to you, you know, and you would be like a celebrity. You get back to your, like, your little town. And anyways, definitely cool stuff. I definitely open my eyes about pilgrimages, so pretty much anything. You on your travels, you kind of have to, you know, your family, everyone's kind of has to say, okay, cool. You know, it has to be, everyone's got to be okay with it. You guess, you know, the local, I guess, bishop or whatnot. It's got to be okay with it. You go and just basically go and do your thing, do your travels, discover what you want to discover, and yeah, and it's cool. You be your own touristy self, you know, and I'm sure they had that, like, save up some money for this, you know, and, like, maybe not money, but stuff to trade with along the way, you know, to kind of to feed yourself. I mean, some places gave you food, but I'm sure, like the bridges and stuff, you might have to pay. But anyways, very cool video. Let me know your thoughts below if you knew what a pilgrimage it was beforehand or whatnot, and what you thought of this video. I thought it was pretty informative, and I really liked it. But anyways, guys, peace. Catch you guys in future videos. Please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. It helps me a lot, and I'm out here. Woo!